The black Maid decoded a symbol on a wine bottle that made the Mafia boss halt the entire celebration. Maya Johnson had always considered herself invisible in the Romano mansion. A quiet, efficient maid who made sure the marble floors were spotless, the wine glasses polished, and the dinner tables set just right. It wasn't that she didn't have dreams or aspirations, but working as a maid for one of the most powerful Mafia families in the city meant knowing her place. Maya was well aware of the unspoken rules. Never question the family, never get too close, and above all, never be seen. But that night was different. As the grand celebration began, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smooth hum of jazz in the background, Maya moved silently among the guests. She carefully poured wine for Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss, who sat at the center of the room with his inner circle. As Maya reached for a bottle of aged Bordeaux, she noticed something unusual. A symbol, subtly etched into the glass of the wine bottle's neck, caught her eye. It wasn't just any symbol. It was a mark associated with a rival family, one that had been silent for years, but had recently resurfaced with dangerous intentions. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she studied the symbol closely. In that moment, everything around her seemed to blur. The laughter of the guests, the clinking of glasses, even the soft chatter faded into the background as her mind raced. She knew exactly what the symbol meant. It wasn't just a coincidence. The bottle was a signal, one that could spell disaster for the Romano family. She had to act quickly. Maya had always been the quiet, unnoticed worker, but her sharp eyes and quick thinking had helped her survive in a world where knowledge was power. And now, this knowledge could save them all. But what should she do? Her instincts screamed at her to remain silent and carry on with her duties, to blend into the background as she always had. But Maya couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary bottle of wine. It was a warning, a mark of betrayal that could destroy everything. As Dominic Romano spoke with his guests, Maya felt the weight of the decision pressing on her. Her hands trembled as she carefully poured the wine into his glass. Her mind raced. What if she was wrong? What if this was all just a coincidence? But deep down, Maya knew better. She had seen this symbol before. The last time she had seen it, chaos had followed. Maya had no choice but to act. She made her way to the side of the room where Dominic was seated. Without a moment's hesitation, she approached him, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke the words that would change everything. "Sir, there's something you need to see." Dominic's piercing gaze met hers, and for a moment, the room fell silent. The music, the laughter, everything seemed to fade as he locked eyes with the woman who had dared to speak out of turn. What happened next would shock everyone, and it all started with a simple wine bottle. As Maya spoke those words, the entire room seemed to freeze. Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss who had controlled the most powerful empire in the city with an iron fist, looked up from his conversation. His piercing dark eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time that evening, Maya felt the full weight of his gaze. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the room suddenly too silent, too still. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the wine bottle in front of him, the symbol still etched in her mind. It was impossible for him to miss it, not with his sharp instincts and knowledge of his enemies. But would he believe her? Or would he dismiss her as just another invisible maid? "What is it, Maya?" Dominic's voice was low, cool, and measured, yet there was a hint of curiosity that made her heart race even faster. She swallowed hard, knowing this could be the moment that changed everything. She had no choice but to speak the truth, no matter the risk. "The wine bottle, sir," Maya said, her voice steady despite the nerves rushing through her. "There's a symbol on it. It's from a rival family, one that's been quiet for years, but I'm certain they're planning something." A moment of silence passed between them, and for a brief second, Maya thought she had made a mistake. She expected him to laugh, to wave her off, or perhaps even reprimand her for speaking out of turn. But Dominic didn't laugh. Instead, he set his glass down slowly, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "Show me," he said quietly. Maya nodded and carefully placed the bottle on the table. As she pointed to the small, almost imperceptible symbol on the bottle's neck, she could see Dominic's expression shift ever so slightly. His brows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. It was as if he had recognized something that Maya hadn't expected him to understand. "How did you know this?" he asked, his voice colder now. but not in a threatening way. Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. She was just a maid, after all. But this wasn't just about the Mafia. It was about lives, perhaps even her own. "I've seen this symbol before, sir," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Years ago, in the files of a former colleague. It's the mark of a rival family, one that specializes in secretive dealings and sabotage." Dominic studied the symbol for a moment longer, his eyes scanning the intricate design with a calculating gaze. Then, he looked back at Maya, his expression hardening. "You've done your homework," he said, almost approvingly. Maya felt a surge of relief mixed with disbelief. Dominic Romano, the man who could crush anyone beneath his heel with a single word, was listening to her. He was taking her seriously. "What should we do?" Maya asked, unable to hide the urgency in her voice. She knew the stakes were high. If she was right, this was more than just a symbol. It was a warning, and the celebration was merely a distraction for a far more dangerous plan. Dominic's face softened slightly, though his eyes remained sharp. "Prepare the room," he said quietly. "We need to act fast. Get the staff ready to move." As Maya turned to leave, she paused for a moment, still in shock. Dominic's words had been calm, controlled. He wasn't panicking. He was taking this seriously, but he wasn't showing fear. And somehow, in that moment, Maya realized that he wasn't just acting out of self-preservation. He respected her. Maya had thought she was just a maid, someone who would never be seen, never be heard. But now, she knew differently. Her knowledge, her attention to detail, had given her a place in this world, one where she could make a difference, even if just for one moment. She turned and walked toward the staff area, a newfound sense of purpose in her steps. She had done it. She had taken the first step to uncovering a plot that no one else had noticed. But she also knew that the true challenge was just beginning. As she prepared the staff and ensured everyone was ready for the next move, Maya couldn't help but wonder, would this be enough? Would her discovery save them from the looming threat? And, more importantly, would Dominic Romano continue to trust her after tonight? The tension in the air was palpable as Maya returned to the heart of the celebration. The guests, oblivious to the danger that loomed just beneath the surface, continued their chatter and laughter. But for Maya, everything had changed. She was no longer just a maid in the background. She had a purpose now, a purpose that was tied to the very future of the Romano family. And she would do whatever it took to see that purpose through. As Maya returned to the main hall, her mind raced with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The guests, oblivious to the shifting tides beneath the surface, continued their conversations, laughter ringing through the air. But Maya knew something they didn't, something that could change everything. She moved swiftly, her steps more purposeful than ever. Dominic Romano had given her the opportunity to prove herself, and now she had to make sure she followed through. She could feel the weight of his trust on her shoulders. It wasn't just about the discovery anymore. It was about what they would do with it. Maya stepped into the staff area, where she quickly found her colleagues. Her voice was calm but urgent as she gave the orders. "Prepare the backup rooms," she instructed the head butler. "Make sure all exits are clear. We may need to move quickly." As her team worked to get everything in place, Maya stood still for a moment, breathing deeply. This wasn't just about doing her job. It was about being part of something much larger. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone with vital knowledge, someone who could change the course of the night. Maya returned to the main hall, her gaze quickly scanning the room. Dominic was still seated at the head of the table, speaking with his associates. Maya could see the tension in his posture, the subtle way he was watching everyone around him. She knew he had already begun to prepare for what was coming, but there was still no sign that anyone else in the room was aware of the danger. As the minutes ticked by, Maya moved through the crowd, carefully keeping an eye on Dominic. She could see him glance her way every now and then, his expression unreadable. The tension in the air seemed to grow thicker with each passing moment. Maya felt her pulse quicken. The moment had arrived. She approached Dominic again, her heart pounding. She hesitated for just a second before speaking, unsure of how he would react, but knowing it was time to take the next step. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The signal, they've already started." Dominic's eyes flashed with a mix of surprise and understanding. He stood up immediately, his commanding presence filling the space. "Move the guests into the ballroom," he ordered, his voice low but filled with authority. "No one leaves this building." Maya nodded, stepping back as Dominic took control of the room. She could feel the shift in energy, the way everyone around them moved with a new sense of urgency. It was as if the entire mansion had come alive with the need for action. Maya knew what was at stake. As she moved through the crowd again, her thoughts raced. What would happen if they couldn't stop whatever was coming? What if she had made a mistake? She pushed the doubt aside. There was no time for second-guessing now. Maya reached the ballroom, where the guests were already beginning to gather. She took her place among the staff, watching as Dominic made his way to the front of the room. He looked every bit the Mafia boss in that moment. Calm, controlled, and deadly serious. Maya could see the gears turning in his mind, his sharp intellect calculating every move. She had done her part, but now it was up to Dominic to take charge. The doors to the ballroom closed, and the music stopped abruptly. Maya could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was about to unfold. Dominic stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his tone commanding. "There has been an attempt to undermine this family tonight. But, rest assured, we are in control." Maya watched closely as Dominic's eyes scanned the room, making sure that everyone understood the gravity of the situation. He wasn't just protecting his family, he was sending a message. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she realized just how much she had underestimated him. This wasn't just a Mafia boss. This was a man who commanded respect, who knew exactly what to do in a crisis. As he spoke, Maya could see the respect and fear in the eyes of the guests. They knew, just as she did, that Dominic Romano was not a man to be crossed. The next few minutes felt like hours as Dominic continued to speak, his words carefully chosen to defuse the tension. "We will find those responsible for this, and they will answer for their actions," he said, his voice unwavering. Maya could see the other members of the Mafia family, their faces hardening as they prepared for whatever came next. But Dominic wasn't done. He turned to Maya, his eyes meeting hers. There was a brief moment of connection between them, a silent acknowledgement of the role she had played in all of this. Maya nodded once, and Dominic gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She had earned his trust, and she had proved her worth. As the tension in the room began to ease, Maya allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had managed to avert disaster, for now. But she knew this was only the beginning. The night was far from over, and the threats they faced were far from gone. Maya had become more than just a maid in that moment. She had become a crucial part of the Romano family's defense. She had proved that intelligence and quick thinking could be just as powerful as brute force in the dangerous world of organized crime. The minutes that followed Dominic's announcement felt like an eternity. The guests, still in shock from the sudden shift in atmosphere, began to murmur amongst themselves. Maya stood in the background, her heart still pounding as she watched Dominic take control of the room with such ease. It was clear that the threat had not only been real, but also closer than anyone had anticipated. As the guests settled into a more subdued state, Dominic's voice cut through the murmurs, commanding their attention once more. "Everyone remains here," he said firmly. "No one leaves until we've handled this situation." His words were final, leaving no room for argument. Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she watched him work. The way he moved through the room, speaking with authority and confidence, was unlike anything she had seen before. This was no longer just a Mafia boss. This was a leader, someone who commanded respect and attention without even raising his voice. Maya took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had a role to play in all of this. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She had proven herself capable of seeing what others couldn't. Now, she had to ensure that the situation didn't escalate any further. As the room fell into an uneasy silence, Maya's thoughts drifted back to the symbol on the wine bottle. It had been a small thing, so easily overlooked, but it had been the key to unraveling a much larger plot. What if Dominic hadn't listened to her? What if she had made a mistake? Her heart clenched at the thought, but she quickly pushed the doubts aside. There was no time for second-guessing. The future of the Romano family depended on the decisions being made in this very moment. Dominic stood at the front of the room, speaking with his most trusted associates, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. He was still in control, But Maya could sense the shift in the air, the calm before the storm. Maya knew that the coming hours would be crucial. She couldn't afford to be just a bystander. As the staff continued to prepare for whatever came next, Maya moved through the room, carefully observing the guests. It was clear that no one was truly comfortable, but there was a certain respect in the air. Everyone knew that Dominic was in charge, and that knowledge made even the most powerful people in the room behave with caution. It was strange, Maya thought, how quickly things had changed. Just hours ago, this had been a celebration, a night of luxury and indulgence. Now it was a waiting game. It was as though the entire mansion had become a fortress, with every guest and every staff member on edge, waiting for the next move. Dominic's voice brought Maya back to the present. "Get the backup plans ready," he said. To his inner circle, "I want everything secured. No one leaves this mansion until we're certain the threat has been neutralized." Maya nodded to herself, understanding the weight of the situation. She wasn't sure how much longer they could keep everyone in the dark, but for now, the most important thing was to stay calm and make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. She could see the staff moving in coordination, preparing for the next steps. She took her position, ready to carry out whatever was necessary. As the hours passed, Maya could feel the tension in the air. Every minute that ticked by felt like a countdown. She watched as Dominic moved between groups, speaking with his family members, his associates, and his trusted staff. His every action was calculated, and Maya couldn't help but admire his ability to stay focused under pressure. It was clear that Dominic wasn't just reacting to the situation. He was thinking several steps ahead. For a moment, Maya wondered if anyone had ever truly seen the side of him that she was witnessing tonight. The side that wasn't just a mafia boss, but a man who was fighting for his family, his legacy, and his own survival. As the night wore on, the atmosphere began to shift again. The guests, who had once been tense and anxious, began to calm down. There was a strange sense of security in the air, the kind that came from knowing they were under Dominic's protection. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over. She knew that the true danger was still lurking, just out of sight. As the clock struck midnight, Maya found herself standing near the back of the room, watching as Dominic spoke with his most trusted advisors. He had gathered them around, speaking in low tones, discussing their next steps. Maya couldn't hear everything, but she could see the intensity in their expressions. Whatever was coming next, it was going to be big. She felt a sense of responsibility weigh heavily on her shoulders. She had seen the symbol on that wine bottle, and that had set everything into motion. But now, there was no turning back. Maya was in this, for better or worse. She had proven herself worthy of Dominic's trust, and now she had to prove herself once again. As the meeting continued, Maya felt a shift in the room. There was a new energy in the air, a sense of anticipation that seemed to be building with every passing second. Dominic had already made his decisions, and now it was time for action. Maya watched as he looked up, his eyes locking with hers for a brief moment. In that fleeting glance, Maya understood. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment that would define everything. The storm was coming, and they had to be ready. As the clock ticked on, the tension in the mansion seemed to grow with every passing second. Maya stood quietly in the corner of the room, her gaze flicking from one person to another as Dominic continued to direct his team with unparalleled precision. The guests, though still on edge, began to sense that the chaos of the evening had subsided, but Maya knew that the real threat was far from over. As Dominic gathered his most trusted men, his eyes kept returning to her, and Maya felt the weight of his silent acknowledgement. She had done her part, but the path ahead was uncertain. He had trusted her, and now it was her turn to prove that she could handle what was coming next. The sounds of quiet conversations filled the air as Dominic's team mobilized, setting up for whatever came next. Maya remained still, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and responsibility. She was no longer just a maid. She was a key player in the unfolding drama of the night, and the knowledge she held could very well change the course of everything. The atmosphere in the room shifted when Dominic turned to face his inner circle, his voice low but firm. "We move in the morning," he said. "I want every lead followed. The rival family won't get away with this." His words were filled with authority, but Maya could sense a certain weariness behind them. Even the most powerful men had their limits, and the night's events had tested them all. Dominic's eyes met Maya's once more, and this time, the look in them was different. There was a hint of gratitude, of understanding. She had earned his respect, and that meant more than anything. The moment between them was brief, but Maya felt a shift in the air. As the guests slowly began to file out of the ballroom, Dominic moved. With purpose, giving orders, and ensuring that everything was in place. Maya, for the first time, found herself not as an observer, but as an active participant in this world of power and intrigue. Her heart beat faster as she followed his lead, stepping into a new role she hadn't expected. As the last guest left, Dominic turned to his team, his voice steady. Make sure the mansion is locked down. No one leaves until we're sure we've neutralized the threat. His words were clear, decisive. The night was far from over, and they still had work to do. Maya felt the weight of the situation settle over her. She had seen the symbol on the wine bottle, and that had set everything into motion. Now, she had to trust that Dominic's plan would be enough to stop whatever was coming. As the staff moved swiftly to secure the mansion, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She wasn't just part of this world, she was shaping its outcome. The adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins all evening began to subside, replaced by a quiet determination. She had done her part, but now, the true test was whether they could handle the consequences. Dominic's voice echoed in the quiet room as he continued to give orders. Prepare for the next phase. We have to be ready for anything. Maya nodded to herself, feeling the gravity of the moment. She wasn't sure what the next day would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened, she would be ready. She had come too far to back down now. Dominic turned and looked at her one last time before heading toward the study. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and Maya saw something in his gaze, a flicker of respect. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was more than she had ever expected to receive from a man like him. As she turned to leave, Maya felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. The chaos of the evening had passed, and now it was time to prepare for whatever came next. She was no longer just a maid. She was a force to be reckoned with. And in that moment, Maya understood something important. She wasn't just fighting for her survival. She was fighting for a future in which she could stand alongside the very people who had once seen her as nothing more than an invisible servant. The night's events had shown her that she was more than capable of holding her own, and that was a power she would carry with her for the rest of her life. It was the following morning, and the mansion stood in eerie silence. The grand chandelier in the foyer gleamed brightly, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Maya had barely slept, her mind racing with everything that had transpired. She had expected to be just a silent observer in the chaotic world of Dominic Romano, but now, things were different. She was no longer an invisible maid in the shadows. She was part of something much larger. The heavy weight of the night before still hung in the air, and as she moved through the hallways, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. She had done her part by pointing out the symbol on the wine bottle, but now Dominic had to carry the real burden of what was to come. Maya had trusted her instincts, and for once, her decision had led to something more than just survival. She had gained his respect, but what would come next? She paused in front of the grand doors of the study, the place where Dominic had spent most of his time since the incident. The house had been locked down all night. No one had been allowed to leave, and the staff had been on high alert. Maya knocked softly on the door, her heart thumping in her chest. Come in, Dominic's voice called from inside. She pushed open the door, stepping into the study. It was dimly lit, with the heavy curtains drawn to keep the sunlight out. The room was lined with bookshelves filled with old leather-bound volumes, and a large mahogany desk sat at the center, its surface cluttered with papers. Dominic was standing by the window, his back to her, staring out into the distance. His posture was tense, his face unreadable. He turned as she entered, his sharp gaze meeting hers. Maya, he said, his voice low but not unkind. I trust you're well. She nodded, unsure of how to respond. The night had been a whirlwind, and she still wasn't sure if she had fully processed everything. Yes, sir, she replied, keeping her voice steady. I'm ready to help in any way I can. Dominic studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing her words. Then, without a word, he motioned for her to sit. Maya took a seat across from him, her hands resting in her lap. She had no idea what to expect now. But she knew this was where her journey in this world was truly beginning. "I've been thinking," Dominic began, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "Last night, you did something few people would have had the courage to do. You pointed out something that could have slipped by unnoticed. For that, you have my thanks." Maya's heart fluttered slightly at his words, but she kept her expression neutral. "This wasn't the time to get sentimental. I just did what I thought was right," she said, the words coming out before she could think about them. Dominic smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. "You've got more insight than most people I know, Maya. That's something I can use." Maya's mind raced. What was he saying? What did he mean by use? She had never imagined herself as anything more than a maid. Her role in this world had always been clear. But now, with Dominic's words hanging in the air, she realized that things were shifting. "You're not just a maid," Dominic continued, as if reading her thoughts. "You've proven you have value beyond your position. And because of that, I'm going to offer you a choice." Maya's brow furrowed in confusion. "A choice? What did that mean?" "I want you to stay," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "Not as a maid, but as someone who will help me protect this family. I need someone who can think on their feet, someone who can see what others miss. And I believe you have that ability." Maya sat there, stunned. The offer was not something she had ever considered. She had never imagined herself in a position of power, let alone being trusted with the safety of an empire. But there was something in Dominic's eyes, something that told her he was serious. She swallowed hard, trying to wrap her mind around what he was saying. "You want me to work with you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic nodded. "Yes," he replied. "You have something that most of my people don't. You're not blinded by loyalty or greed. You see things for what they are." Maya felt a rush of emotions. She had always been an outsider, never truly part of the world she served. But now, Dominic was offering her a place, one where she could truly make a difference. It was a risky offer, but it was an offer that could change her life forever. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm with newfound conviction. Dominic's gaze softened for just a moment, and he gave a small nod. "Good. We'll start with the basics. We have a lot to prepare for, and the family's enemies won't stop coming." Maya's heart beat a little faster, but she felt a sense of calm wash over her. This was it. This was the moment that would define her path in this world. As she stood and followed Dominic's lead, she knew there was no turning back. She was no longer just a maid. She was part of something much bigger, and from that moment on, she would never be the same. The days that followed Maya's decision to join Dominic's inner circle were a whirlwind of new responsibilities and unexpected challenges. The mansion, which had once seemed like a place of luxury and isolation, now felt like a battlefield. Every corner, every hallway, and every shadow carried a sense of urgency. Maya had never imagined that a single decision could change her life so drastically, but as she moved through the house each day, she began to realize just how much she had stepped into. Dominic's trust in her was both a privilege and a burden. She was no longer just an observer in the background. She was now a part of the intricate web that held the Romano family together. But with this new role came a weight of expectations that Maya was still learning to bear. Every move she made was scrutinized. Every decision she made had consequences. It was a far cry from the quiet, predictable life she had once led as a maid. But there was something empowering about the change. Maya no longer had to hide in the shadows. Her insights were valued, her opinions sought after. Dominic had given her the space to prove herself, and she was determined not to let him down. The first task that Dominic had given her was simple yet vital: to observe. He wanted her to keep an eye on the staff, on the guests, and even on the other family members. With so many moving pieces in the Romano Empire, it was crucial to know who could be trusted and who might be working against them. Maya quickly learned that trust was not a luxury she could afford. In this world, everyone had their secrets, and not everyone's loyalties were as clear-cut as they seemed. As the days passed, Maya spent her time studying the patterns of behavior in the mansion. She watched the way people interacted, the subtle shifts in body language, and the way conversations changed when certain people entered a room. It was all part of a larger game, and Maya was learning to play it well. She also began to see just how much Dominic relied on her observations. When he would ask her questions about the staff or the ongoing activities in the house, she was expected to provide detailed answers, not just about what was happening, but about why it was happening. She had to think like him, act like him, and most importantly, see like him. But despite all the changes in her life, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were moments, usually when she was alone in the quiet of the mansion, when she would catch herself wondering if she had made the right choice. Was she truly capable of handling the power and responsibility that came with this new role? Was she ready to be a part of this dangerous world? It was during one of these quiet moments that she found herself standing outside Dominic's office, looking in through the partially open door. He was sitting at his desk, his face unreadable as he spoke with one of his associates. Maya couldn't hear the conversation, but she could tell that it was important. The way they were leaning in toward each other, the urgency in their movements, made her realize just how much was at stake. The stakes were always high in Dominic's world, but now, they were higher than ever. Dominic had made it clear that the rival family who had tried to undermine them the night of the celebration was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. And with every passing day, the threat seemed to grow closer. Maya knew that Dominic's power wasn't just in his ability to make decisions. It was in his ability to control the people around him, to read them, to understand their intentions before they even knew them themselves. It was a skill that Maya was beginning to understand, though she had a long way to go before she could match him. That afternoon, Dominic summoned her to his office. Maya walked in, her mind racing with questions about what he wanted. He was sitting behind his desk, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him, but when she entered, he looked up and gave her a small nod. "Maya," he said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of something deeper. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat as she closed the door behind her. "What about, sir?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked over to the window, staring out into the distance as if gathering his thoughts. "There's a shift in the air," he said finally, his tone contemplative. "A change is coming, and I need you to be prepared." Maya's pulse quickened. "Prepared for what?" she asked, though she already had an inkling of what he meant. Dominic turned to face her, his expression serious. "The rival family," he said. "They're closer than we thought. And I need someone who can help me track their movements, someone who can spot the signs before they happen. I need you to stay alert, Maya. Your instincts have proven to be valuable, but this next step is going to require more than just observation. We need strategy." Maya's mind was racing. She had known that things weren't over, but she hadn't realized how close they were to the tipping point. She had thought she would have more time to adjust, but now it seemed like time was running out. Dominic was right. This was no longer just about staying under the radar. This was about taking control. "I understand," Maya said, her voice firm now, no hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Dominic gave her a sharp look, as if measuring her resolve. Then, for the first time since she had joined him, he smiled. It was a brief smile, but it was enough to make Maya's heart skip a beat. "I knew I made the right choice," he said quietly, before turning back to his desk. "Get some rest, Maya. Tomorrow, we move forward." As Maya left the office, she felt a strange sense of determination settling over her. She wasn't just going to observe anymore. She was going to be a part of the plan, and this time, she would be ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Maya woke to the sound of the mansion bustling with activity. There was a sharp, focused energy in the air that hadn't been there the day before. The events of the previous night still lingered, but now, they were giving way to something more pressing. Dominic had spoken of a shift, and Maya could feel it now. The world she had entered was moving, and it was moving fast. As she dressed in her uniform, a part of her couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She had made a choice that had placed her in the midst of danger, in the midst of a family on the brink of something much larger than she had initially understood. It wasn't just about observing anymore. It was about taking action. Dominic's trust in her wasn't something she could take lightly. As she made her way down the hall to meet him, she passed familiar faces, staff who were now giving her subtle nods of respect. It was as if everything had shifted in the span of a few hours. She was no longer just the maid. She was someone who had proven herself, someone who mattered. When she entered the study, Dominic was already there, sitting at his desk, reviewing papers. His posture was rigid, his eyes scanning the documents with the same sharp focus that Maya had seen the night before. It was like a switch had been flipped. The calm, collected leader was in full force. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, their eyes met, a brief flicker of understanding passing between them. "Maya," he said, his voice steady. "We have work to do." Maya nodded, her pulse quickening. "What's the plan?" she asked, keeping her tone professional. Dominic stood up and motioned for her to sit across from him. "We've got a lead," he said, his voice lowering. "I need you to be my eyes. We're going to move in on the rival family's territory and gather information. I want to know who we're dealing with." Maya felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. "What exactly do you need from me?" she asked, her mind racing with possibilities. Dominic's gaze sharpened. "I need you to get close to their people. Find out what they're planning, who their key players are, and where they're vulnerable. You have a knack for seeing things that others miss. I trust you to bring back the right information." Maya's heart raced. It was one thing to be part of the plan. It was another to be the one executing it. But there was no turning back now. This was the life she had chosen, and she would follow through. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Dominic gave her a slight nod of approval, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. "I know you won't," he said. He turned to his desk and retrieved a small folder, handing it to her. "This contains everything we know so far. You'll need to study it, but don't get too comfortable. You'll be going into their territories soon. We're counting on you to get us the intel we need." Maya took the folder, feeling the weight of its contents. As she glanced down at the documents, she saw the names of several individuals associated with the rival family, names that were both familiar and unfamiliar. The connections were deeper than she had imagined, and the stakes were higher than ever. "I'll start immediately," she said, standing up. Dominic nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Good. We'll keep the mansion on lockdown until we have all the information we need. Be careful out there. They're not the kind of people who play by the rules." Maya's mind raced as she left the study. She had spent most of her life trying to stay invisible, blending into the background, never drawing attention to herself. But now, she was being asked to take the spotlight, to step into a world where every move was calculated, every decision had consequences. As she made her way to her quarters, she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready for this. But as she opened the folder and began to read, the answer became clear. There was no room for doubt now. She had made her choice, and she would see it through. Hours later, Maya was ready. She had memorized the faces in the folder, studied the layouts of the rival family's holdings, and prepared herself for the task ahead. The plan was set into motion, and she was about to step into their world. She was no longer just a maid. She was now a key player in a game that had no rules, a game where only the clever survived. As Maya made her way to the car waiting for her, she glanced back at the mansion. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had first stepped through its doors. The woman she was now was nothing like the one who had arrived. She was stronger, sharper, and ready for whatever came next. Dominic's words echoed in her mind. "I trust you to bring back the right information." The weight of his trust fueled her determination. She wasn't just going to observe anymore. She was going to act. This was the beginning of something much bigger, and Maya was ready to play her part. As the car pulled away from the mansion and into the city, Maya steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The world of power, secrets, and betrayal was vast, but for the first time, she felt like she was truly part of it. As the car pulled through the city streets, Maya's mind raced. She was about to enter the heart of enemy territory, a world she had only ever observed from the sidelines. The rival family's estate loomed ahead, the tall gates and high fences casting long shadows as the car slowed. For a moment, Maya's nerves threatened to overwhelm her. She had prepared for this moment, studied every detail, but now that it was real, she felt the weight of it. There was no turning back. She glanced at the folder she had studied just hours earlier. The names, the faces, those were the people she was about to encounter. People who had no hesitation in playing dirty. But there was one thing that set her apart from them. Maya had nothing to lose. As the car came to a stop at the gate, a security guard approached, giving her a brief nod. Maya's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral, her body language calm. She had to blend in, to move through this world like she belonged. The guard opened the gate, and the car rolled through, heading toward the grand estate. The mansion was as lavish as she had expected, an imposing structure surrounded by lush gardens and high walls. But Maya wasn't here for the luxury. She was here for information. Her instincts told her that the answers she sought were hidden somewhere within these walls. The car stopped in front of the entrance, where a man in a suit stood waiting. He greeted her with a polite smile, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Miss Johnson, welcome," he said, his voice smooth. "The boss is expecting you." Maya nodded, hiding the unease she felt. She had played this role before, played the part of the polite guest who was never fully seen. But this time, things were different. She wasn't here to just observe. She was here to get answers, to uncover the secrets that lay beneath the surface. As the man led her inside, Maya took in the surroundings. The interior was even more lavish than the exterior, with marble floors, gilded accents, and extravagant art adorning the walls. It was a palace, designed to impress and intimidate. But Maya wasn't impressed. She was focused. They walked through a large foyer into a spacious sitting room, where a man sat behind an oversized desk, his back to her. He turned as she entered, a smile spreading across his face. "Ah, Miss Johnson, it's a pleasure," he said, his voice smooth, with a hint of something unsettling beneath the charm. Maya held her ground, meeting his gaze without flinching. "The pleasure is mine," she replied, keeping her voice calm and measured. The man rose from his seat, walking over to greet her. He was well-dressed, his suit sharp and expensive, the type of man who knew how to use his presence to command attention. "Please, have a seat." He gestured to a chair opposite his desk. Maya sat, her posture straight, her hands resting calmly on her lap. "I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you here," he continued, settling back into his chair. "But we both know that your visit isn't entirely by chance, is it?" Maya kept her expression neutral, refusing to show any sign of surprise. "I'm here to discuss business," she said, her tone unwavering. He raised an eyebrow. Intrigued. "Business, indeed," he mused. "But I suspect it's not just business you're after, Miss Johnson. The way you've been maneuvering behind the scenes with the Romano family is quite impressive. But it's not without consequences." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected this family knew more than they let on, but she hadn't anticipated they would be this perceptive. She had to stay calm, to keep her wits about her. "I don't know what you're referring to," she replied coolly, her gaze steady. He chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill down her spine. "Don't play coy," he said, leaning forward slightly. "You're not just a maid, are you? You're not just here to do menial tasks. You're more involved in this game than you're letting on." Maya felt a surge of anger, but she kept it in check. She couldn't afford to reveal anything. "I don't know what game you're talking about," she said, her voice icy. The man smiled, his eyes never leaving hers. "Very well," he said, his tone shifting to something more calculating. "But I do know this. You've caught the attention of the Romano family, and that makes you a target. You may have their trust for now, but that won't last. People like you, people who rise too fast, are always seen as threats." Maya's pulse quickened. She knew he was right. She had already made herself a target, and now there was no way out. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice low but steady. The man's smile widened. "I want information, Miss Johnson," he said smoothly, "and I'm willing to make you an offer. You help us, and I'll make sure the Romano family never sees you coming." Maya's mind raced. This was the moment of truth. She had to decide which side she was on, and it couldn't be based on fear or convenience. This was a game of power, and in this world, there was only one rule: survival. "I'm not interested in making deals with you," Maya said, her voice firm. "I have my own agenda, and it doesn't involve you." The man's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. For a moment, Maya thought she had pushed too far. But then, he leaned back in his chair, his smile returning. "Very well," he said, his voice smooth again. "But remember this. In this world, no one stands alone. Not even you." Maya stood up, her back straight, her face cold. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, before turning and walking out of the room. As she stepped back into the car, her mind was racing. She had just entered the enemy's den, and though she had walked away, the game had only just begun. As the car drove away from the rival family's estate, Maya couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had settled in her chest. The conversation with the man in the suit had been cordial, even polite, but there was a weight to his words that kept echoing in her mind. "In this world, no one stands alone. Not even you." She replayed those words over and over as the car took her back to the mansion. Maya had thought she could play both sides, gather the information Dominic needed, and slip back into the shadows. But it was becoming increasingly clear that there were no shadows left for her to hide in. The world she had entered was one of power, manipulation, and danger, and there was no room for anyone to play the role of the invisible servant. When the car pulled back up to the Romano mansion, Maya stepped out, her legs feeling a little heavier than usual. It wasn't just the weight of the task ahead. It was the weight of what she had just learned. The rival family was watching them closely, waiting for the right moment to strike, and they had already made their move. It was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. As Maya walked into the mansion, she felt a growing sense of urgency. She had to tell Dominic everything she had learned. The longer she waited, the closer the danger would get. She quickly made her way to the study, where Dominic was already waiting, sitting behind his desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You're back," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. Maya nodded, walking toward the desk. "I met with them," she said, keeping her voice steady. "They know more than we thought. They're closer than we realized." Dominic leaned back in his chair, his hands folding together in front of him. "What did you learn?" he asked, his gaze never leaving her face. Maya took a deep breath and recounted everything. The man in the suit, the way he had welcomed her with open arms, the veiled threats disguised as pleasantries. She told him how the rival family had been watching the Romano family's every move, how they were waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. "They're not as disorganized as we thought," Maya finished. "They've been planning for a while, and they've already started to make their move." Dominic's expression darkened, but he didn't show signs of panic. Instead, he seemed to absorb the information, his mind working to process it. "We knew they were dangerous," he said quietly. "But now it's clear they've been gathering strength in ways we didn't anticipate." Maya could see the wheels turning in his mind, but there was something else in his eyes, something she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just the calculated focus of a Mafia boss. It was a certain resolve, as if Dominic was finally ready to fight back. "What's our next move?" Maya asked, her voice steady, but her heart pounding. Dominic stood up, walking to the window and gazing out over the sprawling grounds. "We have to act fast," he said, his voice cold. "We can't let them get any closer. But we can't move recklessly, either. We need to be smart, make sure we're 2 steps ahead." He turned back to face her, his eyes narrowing. "Maya, I need you to keep pushing. I need you to keep getting closer to them. They trust you now, and that's something we can use." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had already stepped so far into enemy territory, but now Dominic was asking her to go even deeper. It was dangerous, and she knew it. But she also knew there was no turning back now. She was already in this world, and there was no place for fear anymore. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice firm. Dominic nodded, his face softening for a moment. "I know you will," he said, his voice filled with a strange mixture of gratitude and admiration. For a brief moment, Maya saw a side of Dominic she hadn't expected. He wasn't just a Mafia boss. He was someone who valued loyalty, someone who understood the stakes of this dangerous game. "We're in this together," he added, his voice low. "And we're not going down without a fight." Maya nodded, a sense of purpose settling in her chest. This was her new reality now. There was no more hiding, no more pretending to be invisible. She was a part of this fight, and she would see it through to the end. As she turned to leave the study, she felt a shift in the air, as if the entire mansion was holding its breath. The game had changed, and she was no longer just a bystander. She was a player, and her every move mattered. As Maya stepped back into the hallway, her mind raced with the weight of what lay ahead. She had already crossed so many lines, but there were still more to cross. The rival family would stop at nothing to take down the Romano Empire, and now, it was up to Maya to ensure they didn't succeed. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. The stakes had never been higher, and now it was time to take action. As the sound of her footsteps echoed in the hallway, Maya knew one thing for sure. She was ready. The days that followed Maya's meeting with Dominic were filled with a palpable tension. The plans were set into motion, and every moment felt charged with urgency. As Maya moved through the mansion, her every action was carefully calculated, her every word deliberate. She was no longer just an observer in this world. She was a key player. The role she had once assumed as the invisible maid had been replaced with something far more complicated and far more dangerous. She had learned to navigate the intricacies of the mansion, the subtle power plays, the shifting alliances, and the carefully hidden agendas. But now, as the stakes grew higher, Maya was beginning to understand just how much she had underestimated the game she was in. One evening, as she was reviewing the information she had gathered, Dominic summoned her again. This time, his tone was more urgent than before. "Meet me in the study," he had said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that Maya hadn't heard before. When she arrived, Dominic was already pacing back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked up as she entered, his gaze sharp and focused. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice low. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of problem?" she asked, her mind immediately racing to the worst-case scenario. Dominic stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "The rival family," he said. "They've made their move. We underestimated how quickly they could act." Maya felt the weight of his words sink in. It wasn't just a matter of gathering information anymore. The time for action had come. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. Dominic's eyes locked onto hers, his gaze piercing. "I need you to go back," he said. "Get close to them again. Find out what they're planning. They're on the move, and we need to know their next step." Maya hesitated for a moment, her thoughts flickering back to the previous meeting at the rival family's estate. The man in the suit had been smooth, calculating. He had been playing a game, but so had she. Now, it was time to step back into that world and get the answers they needed. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. Dominic nodded. "I know you will," he said quietly, a faint trace of approval in his tone. "But be careful. They'll be watching you, just as closely as we're watching them. This time, don't just observe. Make sure you get the information we need, no matter the cost." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence anymore. It was about survival. The tension in the room seemed to increase with every second that passed. Maya knew that she was walking a fine line. One wrong move, and everything she had worked for could come crashing down. "I'll keep my eyes open," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension inside her. Dominic's expression softened slightly, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his eyes. "We're counting on you," he said simply. As Maya turned to leave the study, she felt the full weight of what lay ahead. The pieces were in place, and now the game was on. She had already crossed so many lines, stepping deeper into a world she hadn't fully understood. But now, there was no going back. As she made her way to her quarters, Maya's mind was already working, strategizing her next move. She knew that the rival family was ruthless, but they had underestimated her. They had no idea what she was capable of, and that was exactly how she intended to keep it. The next day, Maya found herself once again standing at the gates of the rival family's estate. This time, however, she was more prepared. She had learned from her first visit. She had observed, gathered what she could, and now she was ready to play her part in this dangerous game. As the car pulled up to the entrance, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She stepped out of the car, her steps purposeful as she walked toward the door. The same man who had greeted her last time was waiting for her. He offered a polite smile, but there was a hint of something more calculating in his eyes. "Miss Johnson," he said, his tone smooth. "It's good to see you again." Maya returned the smile, but there was a coolness to her demeanor now, something that wasn't there before. "It's good to be back," she said, keeping her voice steady. The man led her into the mansion, his every move measured, his eyes flicking to her with a hint of curiosity. Maya knew that she was being watched, that every word, every gesture, would be analyzed. But she was ready for it. She had to be. As they entered the grand sitting room, Maya felt a familiar sense of unease. The lavish decor, the gilded furniture, the expensive artwork, everything was designed to impress. But Maya wasn't here to admire the surroundings. She was here to gather information, to find the answers Dominic needed. The man in the suit gestured for her to sit, his smile still intact. "Make yourself comfortable," he said. Maya nodded, taking a seat across from him, her posture straight and composed. "I trust you're ready to discuss our business," he said, his voice casual, but there was a subtle pressure behind his words. Maya met his gaze without hesitation, her voice calm. "I'm always ready for business," she replied. The game had begun, and this time, she was in control. The days that followed Maya's conversation with Dominic felt like a blur. The world she had entered, one of power, manipulation, and constant scheming, had become her new reality, and it was a reality that demanded more from her than she had ever imagined. As the days passed, Maya's role within the Romano family grew more complicated. She wasn't just gathering information anymore. She was a vital part of Dominic's strategy, a crucial player in a high-stakes game that could change the course of everything. The tension between her and the rival family continued to build, each move they made bringing them closer to a confrontation. But Maya was no longer content to sit on the sidelines. She had already proven that she could be trusted, and now it was time to prove that she was more than capable of handling the next phase of this dangerous game. One evening, Dominic summoned her to the study again. She had grown used to the routine. These late-night meetings where the stakes seemed higher with every word spoken, where every move they made could have lasting consequences. She walked into the study, her mind focused and steady. Dominic was standing by the window, staring out at the mansion's grounds. The familiar tension in the air told her that this meeting would be different from the others. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something sharper, more intense. "Maya," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge. "We've reached a tipping point." Maya nodded, her mind already working. She knew what that meant. The rival family was getting closer, their every move becoming more brazen, more direct. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Dominic took a deep breath and turned back toward the window. "I'm going to need you to do something difficult," he said. "We have a window of opportunity, but it won't last long. You'll need to get close to their key players again. This time, I need you to get them talking, get them to reveal their hand." Maya didn't flinch. She knew what he was asking. It wasn't just about observation anymore. It was about getting involved in a way that might push her to the very edge of this game. "You want me to infiltrate their inner circle," she said, her voice low, but not surprised. Dominic nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Exactly. And you'll need to be convincing. They'll be watching you closely. But you've proven you can handle yourself." Maya's heart beat a little faster, but she kept her expression calm. She had already crossed so many lines, but this was different. She was being asked to take a risk like never before. "What if I don't make it out?" she asked, the question hanging in the air. Dominic looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "You'll make it out. You always do. But we don't have time to waste." Maya swallowed, taking in his words. There was no hesitation in Dominic's voice, no doubt in his mind. He trusted her, and that trust was both a blessing and a burden. She had already crossed one line by stepping into this world. Now, she was about to cross another. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice firm. Dominic nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I knew I could count on you." As she left the study, Maya's thoughts raced. She had come so far, but now she was being asked to take the ultimate risk. The stakes were higher than ever, and the consequences of failure were more dire than she could imagine. But there was no turning back now. The next day, Maya found herself back at the rival family's estate. She had studied their every move, memorized the key players, and now it was time to put everything into action. The man in the suit who had welcomed her during her previous visit was waiting for her at the door. His smile was still there, but there was something different in his eyes now. A sharpness, a calculating look that told Maya he was no longer underestimating her. "Miss Johnson," he greeted her smoothly. "I trust you're here for another round of business?" Maya nodded, her face impassive. "Business, indeed," she said, her voice steady. As she entered the mansion, she couldn't help but notice how different it felt this time. The air was heavier, the tension more palpable. She was no longer an observer. She was a participant in this dangerous game, and the rules had changed. The man in the suit led her to a private room, where several other individuals from the rival family were gathered. They greeted her with polite smiles, but Maya knew they were sizing her up, assessing her value in their own way. The room was grand, filled with expensive furniture and lavish decorations. But Maya wasn't interested in the luxury. She was here for something else, the information she needed to complete her mission. The meeting began, and Maya found herself listening carefully, watching. Every movement, every word exchanged. She had been trained to observe, to listen for the smallest clues, the subtle shifts in conversation that could reveal their plans. As the meeting progressed, she realized that she was gaining ground. The rival family's members were far more open than she had expected. They were playing their cards, letting little details slip that gave her insight into their plans. Maya took mental notes, keeping track of every piece of information that might prove useful. It was risky, too risky, but she had no choice. She had to do this. The conversation shifted toward the Romano family, and Maya leaned in, her attention focused. This was what she had been waiting for. The man in the suit, noticing her interest, leaned forward slightly. "You must understand," he said, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "The Romano family has grown too powerful. It's time for a change." Maya's pulse quickened. She had what she needed, but she had to keep her cool. "What kind of change?" she asked casually, her voice betraying none of the tension she felt inside. The man smiled, his eyes glinting with something dark. "The kind that ensures we control everything. Everything, including the Romano family." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The danger was closer than she had thought. But now she had the information she needed. The pieces were falling into place, and the next steps were clear. She had to get back to Dominic and tell him everything. The game was on, and there was no turning back now.